The January wind whipped through Manhattan's concrete canyons, sending icy fingers between the towering skyscrapers. Daxton Everett Hill stood at his corner office window on the 45th floor, his imposing 6.2 frame reflected in the glass. The city sprawled before him like a chessboard, and for the past 20 years, he'd been the grandmaster, orchestrating every move with precision. His Rolex Daytona glinted under the fluorescent lights as he adjusted his charcoal Armani suit. At 45, Daxton had mastered the art of commanding attention without saying a word. His clean-shaven head and perfectly maintained Turkish beard spoke of power and control, while his piercing blue eyes held the intensity of a man who'd sacrificed everything for success. "Mr. Hill?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The board meeting starts in 10 minutes. "On my way," he responded, his deep voice carrying the weight of authority. The familiar scent of Tom Ford Noir surrounded him as he gathered his documents. Another day, another victory to secure. This was his life now. Meetings, contracts, and the endless pursuit of greater heights. It was everything he'd ever wanted. Or so he thought. The elevator descended smoothly, each floor taking him closer to the ground level and the waiting boardroom. His mind drifted, unbidden, to a different January 2 years ago. A night when snowflakes danced outside windows fogged with laughter and warmth, when the scent of honey and vanilla had replaced his signature cologne, when Daxton gritted his teeth, banishing the memory. He'd spent 2 years building walls around thoughts of Aloe and Marie Hayes. Now just Hayes, he reminded himself bitterly. The divorce papers had made that clear. The elevator doors opened to the marble-floored lobby, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the polished surface. Board members nodded respectfully as he passed, their eyes following his commanding presence. This was his domain, his empire, built brick by brick with unwavering determination, and he stopped dead in his tracks. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the lobby, across the busy street, a familiar figure caught his eye. Honey-blonde hair cascading over a cream-wool sweater, the graceful movement he'd recognize anywhere. Alowen. For a moment, time stood still. She looked exactly as he remembered, perhaps even more beautiful, if that was possible. The same green eyes that had once looked at him with such love, the same delicate features that had haunted his dreams. But she wasn't alone. In her arms, she carried a small bundle wrapped in a pink winter coat, a child, a little girl with blonde curls peeking out from under a tiny knitted hat. As they waited at the crosswalk, the toddler turned her head, and Daxton's world tilted on its axis. Blue eyes. His eyes. The child, who couldn't be more than 18 months old, stared directly at him through the glass, her tiny face lighting up with curiosity. She had his eyes, his mother's curls, and Alowen's smile. The math wasn't difficult. The timing, the sudden divorce, the way Alowen had left without explanation. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to explain. "Mr. Hill?" One of the board members touched his arm. "We're ready to begin." But Daxton couldn't move. His carefully constructed world of steel and glass was shattering around him. The traffic light changed, and Alowen stepped off the curb, holding their daughter, close against the winter wind. "I apologize," he managed, his voice rough. "Something urgent has come up. Reschedule the meeting." He was moving before the words fully left his mouth, pushing through the revolving doors into the bitter cold. His heart pounded against his ribcage as he crossed the street, barely registering the blaring horns of frustrated drivers. "Alowen." She froze at the sound of his voice, her back stiffening. The little girl in her arms squirmed, trying to look over her mother's shoulder at the source of the shout. Slowly, painfully slowly, Alowen turned. Her green eyes widened with fear, then resignation. She held the child tighter, as if preparing for a storm. "Daxton," she whispered, her voice carrying on the wind. I can explain." He stared at the child, at his daughter, who was now reaching out toward him with tiny mittened hands, a smile of pure innocence on her face. She had no idea who he was, no idea that her very existence had just turned his world upside down. "Explain?" His voice was dangerously quiet, barely containing the tornado of emotions threatening to break free. "Explain how you kept my child from me for nearly 2 years. How you walked away without a word about—" He gestured helplessly at the little girl, who was now making grabbing motions toward his face, fascinated by his beard. "Dada?" the little girl questioned. looking between them with intelligent eyes that mirrored his own. The word hit him like a physical blow. Elowen's eyes filled with tears. "Her name is Ava," she said softly. "Ava Hayes Hill. And you're right. I should have told you. But you were so clear about never wanting children, about how they would interfere with your plans. I was scared, Dax. Scared of what you might say, what you might do. So you made the decision for me." The hurt in his voice was raw, undisguised. "You took away my chance to what? To be a father? To watch his daughter's first smile, first steps, first words? To hold her when she cried? Mama, up," Ava demanded, still reaching for Daxton's face with determined curiosity. The simple request broke through the tension, and Elowen adjusted her grip, trying to keep the squirming toddler secure. "We can't do this here," Elowen said, glancing around at the passing crowds. "Not on the street." "Then where?" Daxton demanded, his business empire forgotten, board meeting abandoned. Nothing mattered except the truth he saw in his daughter's face. "When were you planning to tell me, Elowen? When she started school? College? Never?" A tear slipped down Elowen's cheek. "Come by the house tonight. The old house. I never sold it. We can talk there, properly. Ava will be calmer after her nap." The mention of their former home, the brownstone where they'd spent 3 years of marriage building a life he'd thought was perfect, sent another wave of pain through his chest. How many nights had he driven past that house, wondering why she'd left? Now he knew. 7 o'clock, he said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "I want to know everything." Elowen nodded, then turned to leave. But Ava had other plans. She reached out one last time, her small hand managing to grab Daxton's tie. "Pretty," she declared with a giggle before letting go. The simple touch of his daughter's hand, the first contact he'd ever had with her, burned through his chest like fire. He watched as Elowen hurried away, his little girl waving goodbye over her shoulder, completely unaware that she'd just changed everything. Daxton stood there long after they'd disappeared around the corner, the winter wind biting at his exposed skin. His phone buzzed constantly with messages about the abandoned meeting, but he couldn't bring himself to care. In his mind, he kept seeing those blue eyes, his eyes, looking back at him with innocent wonder. He had a daughter, a beautiful, perfect little girl who'd been hidden from him for 18 months. And the only woman he'd ever truly loved had kept this secret, believing he would reject them both. The worst part, 2 years ago, she might have been right. But now, watching them walk away, Daxton Everett Hill felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Fear. Fear of losing something far more precious than any business deal. Fear of missing more moments of his daughter's life. And beneath it all, a desperate, burning need to understand why the woman he'd never stopped loving had chosen to face parenthood alone, rather than trust him with the truth. Tonight, he would get his answers. And nothing, not his empire, not his carefully constructed walls, not even his own fears, would stand in his way. Elowen's hands trembled as she placed Ava in her crib for her afternoon nap. The little girl had finally drifted off, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant, completely unaware of the storm brewing around her. Sunlight filtered through the nursery's pale yellow curtains, casting a warm glow over the room that Elowen had so carefully prepared, alone, 18 months ago. "Sweet dreams, my love," she whispered, gently stroking Ava's blonde curls. The familiar scent of baby shampoo and lavender lotion filled her senses, usually bringing comfort. Today, it only heightened her anxiety about the evening ahead. 7 o'clock, less than 4 hours until she would have to face Daxton again, this time without the buffer of Manhattan's busy streets between them. Her Jo Malone peony and blush suede perfume, usually so subtle and elegant, suddenly felt too delicate for the confrontation ahead. Moving to the kitchen of their old brownstone, Elowen began stress baking, a habit she'd developed during culinary school and perfected during her pregnancy. The familiar motions of measuring flour, creaming butter, and folding in chocolate chips provided a temporary escape from the chaos in her mind. But as she worked, memories flooded back unbidden. The day she discovered she was pregnant, right after Daxton's biggest corporate celebration, the way her hands had shaken holding the positive test, knowing how her husband felt about children. His voice echoed in her mind, clear as day from one of their last conversations before the news. "Children are a liability, Elowen. They destroy careers, marriages, ambitions. I've worked too hard to risk everything now. The timer dinged, jolting her back to the present. She pulled out a perfect batch of chocolate chip cookies, Daxton's favorite, though she told herself she wasn't making them for him. The scent of vanilla and melted chocolate filled the kitchen, a bittersweet reminder of happier times. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from her best friend, Raven. "Everything okay? You left the restaurant in a hurry earlier." Elowen stared at the message, remembering how she'd practically run out of her own restaurant when she'd spotted Daxton across the street. She'd been taking Ava for her checkup at the pediatrician near his office building, a risk she took every 3 months, always careful to avoid the times she knew he'd be in meetings. Until today. "He knows," she typed back, her fingers shaking. "Daxton saw us. He's coming over tonight." 3 dots appeared immediately, followed by, "Do you need me to come over? I can watch Ava while you talk." "No," Elowen replied. "This is something I have to face alone, just like I should have 2 years ago." Setting down her phone, she walked to the living room window, the same window where she used to wait for Daxton to come home from late meetings, where she'd stood crying the night she left, where she now watched Ava take wobbly steps in the small garden out front. The grandfather clock in the hallway, a wedding gift from Daxton's parents, chimed 6 times, its deep resonance echoing through the house. 1 hour left. Upstairs, Ava stirred and began to babble happily in her crib, her afternoon nap complete. The sound of her daughter's voice steeled Elowen's resolve. Everything she'd done, every choice she'd made, had been to protect this precious little girl. She climbed the stairs to get Ava ready, selecting a soft purple dress and matching bow. As she dressed her daughter, Ava kept reaching for her face, her favorite way of demanding attention. "Mama sad?" Ava asked, her tiny hands patting Elowen's cheeks. At 18 months, her emotional intelligence sometimes seemed uncanny. "No, baby," Elowen smiled, though her heart ached. "Mama's just thinking." "Think hard," Ava declared seriously, scrunching up her face in an exaggerated thinking expression that made Elowen laugh despite herself. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. Elowen's heart stopped, then started racing. Of course he was precisely on time. Daxton had always valued punctuality above almost everything else. She lifted Ava into her arms, drawing strength from her daughter's warm weight against her chest. "Coming!" she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. Each step down the stairs felt like walking toward judgment. Ava squirmed excitedly, somehow sensing the importance of the moment. When Elowen opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. Daxton filled the doorframe, his powerful presence unchanged by the passing hours. He'd changed from his morning suit into dark jeans and a charcoal cashmere sweater that made his blue eyes, Ava's eyes, even more striking. The scent of his cologne mixed with the crisp winter air as he stepped into the foyer. "Dada," Ava squealed before either adult could speak, reaching out those grabbing hands again. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Daxton's carefully controlled expression cracked slightly. She knows who I am." Elowen swallowed hard. "I've shown her pictures. Every night before bed, we look at the photo album from our wedding. I tell her stories about her daddy, about how smart and strong he is. I never wanted her to think she wasn't loved, even if I never knew she existed." The edge in his voice cut like a blade. "A pretty," Ava interrupted, pointing at Daxton's watch, the same way she had with his tie that morning. Her innocent fascination with shiny objects broke through the tension, just as it had on the street. Daxton's eyes softened as he looked at his daughter. May I hold her?" The question, asked with such uncharacteristic uncertainty, made Elowen's heart twist. She nodded, carefully transferring Ava into her father's arms. The little girl went willingly, immediately reaching for his beard with curious fingers. "Scratchy," she giggled, patting his face. Watching them together, Ava's tiny hand against Daxton's cheek, his strong arms cradling her so carefully, Elowen felt tears threatening again. This was the moment she'd simultaneously dreaded and longed for since the day she discovered she was pregnant. "She has your mother's curls," she said softly, "and your eyes." "Exactly your eyes." "Why, Elowen?" Daxton's voice was rough with emotion as he held their daughter. "Why didn't you trust me with this? We were married. We loved each other. How could you think I wouldn't want to know my own child?" "Because you told me, so many times, that children would ruin everything you'd built, that they were a burden you never wanted to bear." Elowen moved toward the living room, gesturing for him to follow. "And I was terrified. Terrified you'd reject us both. Terrified you'd feel trapped. Terrified you'd resent her before she was even born. So I ran. I convinced myself it was better to leave than to watch you pull away from us day by day. Daxton sat carefully on the sofa, Ava still contentedly playing with his beard. You didn't give me a chance, he said, the hurt evident in his voice. You made assumptions about what I would do, how I would feel, and then you took my daughter away before I could prove you wrong. Would I have been wrong? Elowen challenged, even as her heart ached at his words. 2 years ago, if I had told you I was pregnant, would you have been happy? Would you have wanted this? Before he could answer, Ava squirmed in his arms, pointing to the kitchen. Cookie. Mama make cookie. A ghost of a smile touched Daxton's lips. Chocolate chip? He asked, looking at Elowen. You still bake when you're nervous. Some things don't change, she admitted softly. And some things change everything, he replied, looking down at their daughter. Like finding out you have a beautiful little girl who apparently knows your face from a photo album and thinks your beard is scratchy. Elowen moved to get the cookies, needing a moment to compose herself. When she returned with a small plate, Ava was showing Daxton her stuffed elephant, chattering away in her mix of real words and baby talk. He was listening with complete attention, as if her toddler babbling was as important as any board meeting. She's incredible, he said quietly, accepting a cookie from the plate. Perfect. I've missed so much. I know, Elowen whispered, watching Ava break her cookie into tiny pieces, a habit she'd developed recently. But I'm so sorry, Dax, not for protecting her, but for not giving you the chance to prove me wrong, for letting my fear make such a huge decision for all of us. I want to be in her life, he said firmly. I want to know everything about her favorite foods, her bedtime routine, the songs she likes, everything. And I want, he paused, meeting Elowen's eyes. I want to understand how we got here, really understand. No more running, no more assumptions. We owe each other that much, don't we? Ava chose that moment to stuff a piece of cookie into her father's mouth, giggling at his surprised expression. Share, she declared proudly, looking at them, Daxton with cookie crumbs in his perfectly maintained beard, Ava beaming at her successful sharing. Elowen felt something shift in her chest. The wall she'd built around her heart, designed to protect them both, began to crack. Yes, she agreed softly. We owe each other that much, and we owe her so much more. Outside, snow began to fall, dusting the New York streets with fresh powder. Inside the brownstone, surrounded by the scent of chocolate chip cookies and baby shampoo, 3 people who should have been a family from the start began the delicate process of understanding what they might still become. 2 weeks had passed since that snowy evening in the brownstone, and Daxton's world had shifted on its axis. His corner office, once his sanctuary, now felt like a prison keeping him from what mattered most. He found himself constantly checking his phone, scrolling through the photos Elowen had begun sending him daily. Ava at breakfast, covered in oatmeal. Ava attempting to help him with the laundry. Ava napping with her beloved elephant. Mr. Hill? His assistant's voice interrupted his thoughts. The lawyers are here for the custody agreement discussion. Daxton straightened in his chair, tucking his phone away. Send them in. The legal team filed in, led by Bradford Wellington, his most trusted corporate attorney. The older man's face held an unusually concerned expression as he took his seat. Daxton, Bradford began, his tone careful. I've reviewed the situation. Given the circumstances, the concealment of the child, the sudden divorce, we could build a strong case for full custody. Your resources, stability. Stop. Daxton's voice cut through the air like steel. I didn't ask you here to take my daughter away from her mother. I want joint custody papers drawn up. Fair, generous terms. Bradford blinked in surprise. But sir, given Ms. Hayes's actions, the only papers I want to see are ones that ensure I can be part of my daughter's life without destroying her mother's. Daxton stood, moving to the window. Elowen is an excellent mother. Ava is happy, healthy, and loved. I won't disrupt that, I just want... He paused, watching a flock of pigeons wheel past the glass. I want to be her father. The legal team exchanged glances, clearly unused to this softer side of the corporate titan. Bradford cleared his throat. Very well. We'll draft joint custody agreements. However, there is another matter we should discuss. The Richardson merger. Daxton turned, his expression sharpening. What about it? The board is concerned about your recent Distraction. The merger requires 6 months in London to oversee the transition. They're questioning your commitment. The words hit Daxton like a physical blow. 6 months in London. 6 months away from Ava, just when he was beginning to know her. Away from her first words, her growing vocabulary, her changing personality. When? He asked, his voice tight. They want you there by next month. March through August. March through August. He'd miss Ava's second birthday in July. Miss the summer Alawan had talked about spending teaching their daughter to swim. I'll need time to consider the implications, he said finally. Have the custody papers on my desk by tomorrow morning. That's all. After they left, Daxton sank into his chair, loosening his tie. His phone buzzed with a new message from Alawan. A video this time. His heart lightened as he pressed play. Say good morning to Daddy? Alawan's voice came from behind the camera. Ava, dressed in tiny pink pajamas, beamed at the screen. Morning, Dada. Love you. The words, still slightly garbled but clear enough, made his chest tight. She'd been practicing, Alawan had told him, wanting to surprise him during his next visit. Before he could stop himself, Daxton was reaching for his coat. The Richardson merger could wait. Right now, he needed to see his daughter. 30 minutes later, he stood outside Alawan's restaurant, Sweet Endings, watching through the window. The lunch rush was in full swing, and he could see her moving through the dining room, stopping to chat with regular customers. Her chef's coat was pristine, her honey blonde hair neatly braided, but he could see the slight shadows under her eyes, the toll of running a successful restaurant while raising a toddler alone. The bell chimed as he pushed open the door, and heads turned at his entrance. He cut an imposing figure in his tailored suit, and several diners recognized him from business magazines and news coverage. Alawan looked up at the sound, her green eyes widening slightly. Dax, is everything okay? Everything's fine, he assured her quickly. I got your video. Is she here? A soft smile touched Alawan's lips. In the office, having lunch with Raven. Come on. She led him through the busy kitchen, where staff called out greetings. They'd grown used to his increasingly frequent visits over the past 2 weeks. At the back of the restaurant, a converted storage room now served as both office and impromptu playroom. Raven, Alawan's best friend and restaurant manager, sat cross-legged on the floor with Ava, sharing a plate of mac and cheese, their daughter's current favorite food. Dada, Ava squealed, abandoning her lunch to toddle toward him. Up, Daxton scooped her up, breathing in her sweet baby scent. Hello, princess. Were you practicing your surprise for me? Love you, Ava declared proudly, patting his face in her familiar gesture. Raven stood, brushing off her slacks. I'll give you guys a minute, she said, squeezing Alawan's arm as she passed. Once the door closed, Alawan moved closer, her expression concerned. Not that I mind the surprise visit, but what's really going on, Dax? He held Ava closer, watching as she played with his tie clip. The board wants me in London, 6 months, starting next month. Oh, the single syllable carried volumes of understanding. For the Richardson merger? Yes. He met her eyes over their daughter's curly head. I haven't given them an answer yet. Alawan leaned against her desk, studying him. 2 years ago, you wouldn't have hesitated. The merger would have been everything. 2 years ago, I didn't know what I was missing. He shifted Ava to his hip as she began to squirm. I'd miss her birthday, miss the swimming lessons you planned, miss so much. But this merger, it's huge for your company, isn't it? It's a multi-billion-dollar deal. The board's been working toward it for years. Alawan was quiet for a moment, watching as Ava reached for her abandoned mac and cheese. You know, she said finally, they have pools in London, and I hear they celebrate birthdays there too. Daxton stared at her. What are you saying? I'm saying, maybe we could work something out. The restaurant has a strong management team. Raven's been wanting more responsibility. And Ava, she smiled softly, Ava should have her father there for her birthday. You'd come to London. Not permanently, she clarified quickly. But for the summer, maybe, July and August. Give Ava a chance to spend real time with you. Give us all a chance to figure out how this co-parenting thing really works. Daxton sat in Alawan's office chair, settling Ava in his lap. You'd do that. After everything. Dax, these past 2 weeks, watching you with her, seeing how much you want to be part of her life, I was wrong before. letting my fears make decisions for all of us. I don't want to make the same mistake again. Ava chose that moment to offer Daxton a cheese-covered noodle. Share, she insisted, her favorite new word. He accepted it solemnly, making her giggle. Thank you, princess. She's got your negotiation skills, Elowen observed with a laugh, sealing deals with mac and cheese instead of handshakes. A much better currency, Daxton agreed, wiping cheese from their daughter's chin. He looked up at Elowen, taking in the woman who had once been his wife, who was now the mother of his child, who still had the power to surprise him after all this time. We could get a house with a pool, he said carefully. Something in Kensington, maybe. Plenty of space for her to play. And separate bedrooms, Elowen added firmly, though her cheeks flushed slightly. Of course. He tried to ignore the way his heart jumped at her blush. Thank you, Ellie, for considering this. The old nickname slipped out before he could stop it. Elowen's breath caught audibly, but before she could respond, Ava smashed a handful of mac and cheese into Daxton's perfectly trimmed beard. Share more, she declared triumphantly. Their laughter filled the small office, echoing out into the busy restaurant. And if their eyes met a moment too long over their daughter's antics, if their fingers brushed a second too long while cleaning up the mess, well, London was still months away. But as Daxton returned to his office that afternoon, his tie stained with cheese and his heart lighter than it had been in years, he couldn't help but think that sometimes the biggest business deals weren't the ones that changed your life the most. Sometimes it was a handful of mac and cheese, a toddler's love you, and the possibility of a second chance you never knew you needed. The March wind howled outside the windows of the brownstone as Elowen sorted through Ava's clothes, trying to decide what to pack for London. Summer in England would be different from New York's sweltering heat, and the thought of preparing for 3 months abroad while running her restaurant made her head spin. No, no, no! Ava's voice rang through the house, followed by the sound of tiny feet running down the hallway. Ava Hayes Hill, come back here right now. Daxton's deep voice carried up the stairs, a hint of laughter beneath his stern tone. Elowen peeked out of the nursery just in time to see their daughter, completely naked except for her diaper, streak past with a triumphant giggle. Daxton appeared a moment later, his usual impeccable appearance somewhat disheveled, holding a tiny dress and looking thoroughly outmatched by an 18-month-old. Having trouble? Elowen asked, trying to hide her smile. She's impossible to dress after her bath, he complained, though his eyes sparkled with amusement. How do you do this every day? Years of practice, and a lot of bribes involving stuffed animals. They found Ava in the master bedroom, attempting to hide behind the curtains. Her blonde curls and diapered bottom were clearly visible, but she remained convinced of her stellar hiding abilities. Where's Ava? Daxton played along, making an exaggerated show of looking around. I can't see her anywhere. A muffled giggle came from behind the curtain. Oh well, he sighed dramatically. I guess since I can't find her, I'll have to give her cookie to Mommy instead. No, here, Ava burst out from her hiding spot, running straight into her father's arms. My cookie? Sneaky, Elowen approved, watching as Daxton finally managed to get their squirming daughter into her dress. You're learning. I had a good teacher, he replied softly, their eyes meeting over Ava's head. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken words and memories. Elowen looked away first, her cheeks warm. I should finish packing her things. About that, Daxton settled Ava on his hip, following Elowen back to the nursery. I've been thinking. The house I found in Kensington has a fully equipped kitchen. You could use it to experiment with new recipes for the restaurant. Maybe even research British cuisine for a potential menu expansion. Elowen paused in her sorting. You remembered I wanted to add an international section to the menu. You mentioned it once, about 3 years ago, he said, sitting on the window seat with Ava. You were excited about fusion desserts, combining American classics with global flavors. The fact that he remembered such a small detail from their marriage made her heart flutter traitorously. I didn't think you were listening back then. You were always so focused on work. I listened more than you knew, he admitted quietly. I just didn't show it well. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from Raven. Emergency at the restaurant. Supplier mixed up our orders. Need you ASAP. I have to go. She sighed, showing him the message. The London planning will have to wait. I can finish packing for Ava, Daxton offered. I may be new to this parenting thing, but I can handle clothes. Elowen hesitated. Are you sure? She can be a handful. and you probably have work. I cleared my schedule for our packing day, he said simply. Go handle your emergency. We'll be fine. She grabbed her coat, then turned back. Her favorite elephant has to go in her carry-on, not the checked luggage, and she needs her special blanket for nap time. And, Elowen, Daxton's voice was gentle but firm. I've got this. Trust me. Trust. Such a simple word, but one loaded with history between them. She looked at him, really looked at him. The powerful CEO was gone, replaced by a father sitting patiently with his daughter, ready to sort through tiny socks and t-shirts. Okay, she said softly. I trust you. 4 hours later, Elowen returned to find the house surprisingly quiet. She followed the sound of soft music to the living room and stopped in the doorway, her heart melting at the sight before her. Daxton lay stretched out on the couch, fast asleep, with Ava curled up on his chest like a little cat. Their daughter clutched her elephant in one hand and a fistful of her father's sweater in the other. Landslide by Fleetwood Mac, Ava's favorite lullaby, played softly from Daxton's phone, but it was the coffee table that really caught her attention. Neat piles of clothes were sorted by type and color, with sticky notes labeling each stack. Summer dresses, play clothes, special occasions. A detailed list in Daxton's precise handwriting noted everything still needed, including the exact brand of sunscreen Elowen always used for Ava's sensitive skin. She must have made some small sound, because Daxton's eyes fluttered open. Hey, he whispered, careful not to wake Ava. Crisis resolved? Yeah, she whispered back, moving closer. You got everything organized. Almost everything. Though I think we need to discuss why our daughter has 17 different hair bows, says the man who owns 30 nearly identical ties. She teased, perching on the arm of the couch. 28, he corrected with a small smile. I donated 2 last week. Apparently they weren't pretty enough for someone's standards. He glanced down at their sleeping daughter. Elowen laughed softly. She's got expensive taste. Wonder where she gets that from. Must be her mother's side. All those fancy cooking ingredients you use. Their quiet laughter faded into comfortable silence, broken only by Ava's soft breathing and the gentle music. It felt right, peaceful, like the family they should have been all along. I'm sorry, they both said at the same time, then stared at each other in surprise. You first, Elowen whispered. Daxton stroked Ava's back gently as he spoke. I'm sorry I made you feel like you couldn't tell me about her, that I was so focused on success that I missed what really mattered. Watching you run out to handle the restaurant crisis today, that used to be me, always running off to handle the next emergency, the next deal, the next merger. I missed so much, and I'm sorry I didn't give you the chance to prove me wrong, Elowen replied, reaching out to smooth Ava's curls. Her fingers brushed against Daxton's, sending a familiar spark through her skin. I was so scared of losing you that I pushed you away first. It wasn't fair to you, and it wasn't fair to her. We can't change the past, Daxton said quietly, his blue eyes intense. But London, it's a fresh start, a chance to do things differently. As co-parents, Elowen added quickly, though her heart raced at his gaze. Of course, but his free hand found hers where it rested on Ava's back, his thumb tracing small circles on her skin. Though you have to admit we make a pretty good team when we try. Before she could respond, Ava stirred, blinking sleepily. Mama back, she observed with a drowsy smile. Family hug? It was impossible to resist that request. Elowen leaned down, letting herself be pulled into their daughter's embrace. For a moment, with Daxton's arm warm against her back and Ava's sweet baby scent surrounding them, she could almost believe they were still a family. But they weren't. Not in that way. London would be about co-parenting, about giving Ava the father she deserved. Nothing more. So why did her heart feel so full as she helped Daxton up from the couch? Why did her skin tingle where he steadied her with a hand at her waist? And why, as she watched him gather their sleepy daughter and the meticulously sorted clothes, did she have the feeling that London would change everything? Dinner? Daxton asked, breaking into her thoughts. I promised someone mac and cheese if she behaved for packing. And did she behave? Elowen raised an eyebrow. Well, he grinned, remembering the post-bath chase. Let's say she earned at least half a bowl. As they moved to the kitchen together, Ava chattering happily between them, Elowen couldn't help but wonder, was it possible to rebuild something broken into something even better? Or were they just setting themselves up for more heartbreak? London, she decided, Watching Daxton settle Ava into her high chair with practiced ease would definitely be interesting. The private jet touched down at London City Airport just as the sun was setting over the Thames. Daxton glanced at his sleeping daughter, curled up in Elowen's lap, amazed at how peaceful she looked after the long flight. Her elephant was tucked securely under one arm, and her other hand clutched her mother's sweater, a gesture that had become as familiar to him as his own heartbeat over the past months. "We're here," he said softly to Elowen, who had also dozed off. Her eyes fluttered open, the green irises catching the golden light streaming through the window. Already, she shifted carefully, trying not to wake Ava. She slept through most of the flight. "We'll probably pay for that tonight. I can take the first shift if she's up," Daxton offered, gathering their carry-on bags. "You need rest." Elowen gave him a grateful smile that made his chest tighten. Always the negotiator, making deals even about midnight wake-up calls. The car was waiting on the tarmac, a sleek black Range Rover with a child seat already installed. As they drove through London's historic streets, Ava began to stir, her blue eyes widening at the unfamiliar sights. "Big clock," she exclaimed as they passed Big Ben, pressing her tiny hands against the window. "That's right, Princess," Daxton said, enjoying her excitement. "That's Big Ben. And look, there's the London Eye, the big wheel in the sky." "Wheel? Up? Maybe tomorrow," Elowen laughed. "First, we need to see our new house." The house in Kensington was everything Daxton had promised and more. Set back from the street behind wrought iron gates, the Victorian mansion had been fully modernized inside while maintaining its historic charm. The driver pulled into the circular driveway, where an elegant fountain played in the center. "Home?" Ava asked, looking between her parents uncertainly. "For a little while, sweet girl," Elowen assured her, unbuckling her from the car seat. "Look, there's a garden for you to play in." The front door opened, and an elegant woman in her 60s emerged. "Mr. Hill, Miss Hayes, welcome to London. I'm Mrs. Ainsworth, the housekeeper. Everything has been prepared according to your specifications." Daxton nodded in approval. "Thank you, Mrs. Ainsworth. Is the nursery ready?" "Yes, sir. And the kitchen has been stocked per Mims. Hayes's list. I've also taken the liberty of preparing a light supper, as I assumed you'd be tired from the flight." They followed her inside, Ava taking tentative steps in the grand entrance hall. The house was warm and inviting despite its size, with comfortable furniture and soft lighting that made it feel like a home rather than a showpiece. "Dada house big," Ava observed, her voice echoing slightly in the space. "Your room is even better," Daxton promised, leading the way upstairs. "Want to see?" The nursery took up half of the third floor, a magical space painted in soft yellows and greens. A hand-carved wooden crib, an exact replica of the one from New York, stood near the window overlooking the garden. Stuffed animals lined custom shelves, and a reading nook was created with floating bookshelves and oversized cushions. "Dax," Elowen breathed, taking in the details. "This is incredible. I wanted her to feel at home," he said simply, watching as Ava discovered her toys, many familiar from New York along with some new additions. "Your room is across the hall, and mine is on the floor below. I thought you'd want to be close to her." The thoughtfulness of the arrangement touched Elowen deeply. "Thank you. This is perfect." Mrs. Ainsworth appeared in the doorway. "Supper is served in the kitchen if you're ready. I've prepared mac and cheese for the little one. Mr. Hill mentioned it was a favorite." Ava's head snapped up at the magic words. "Mac cheese." Over dinner in the bright, state-of-the-art kitchen, Daxton watched his daughter and her mother adjust to their new surroundings. Elowen was already examining the professional-grade appliances with obvious approval, while Ava seemed delighted by the child-sized table and chair set placed near the kitchen island. "The Richardson team wants to meet tomorrow morning," he said, sipping his wine. "Just a brief introduction before the real work starts next week." "That's fine," Elowen replied, wiping cheese from Ava's chin. "I thought we might explore the neighborhood, maybe find a park, let her burn off some energy after being cooped up on the plane. I could join you after the meeting," he offered, trying to sound casual. "Show you both around Kensington. There's a wonderful children's bookstore nearby." "Books," Ava clapped, cheese-covered hands spraying droplets across the table. "After we wash those hands, little miss," Elowen laughed, reaching for a napkin at the same moment Daxton did. Their fingers brushed, and that familiar spark of electricity shot through them both. They pulled back quickly, but not before their eyes met in a look that said more than words could. Later that night, after Ava was finally asleep in her new bed, Elowen found Daxton in the garden. He stood by the fountain, his suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up as he stared at the water. "Penny, for your thoughts?" she asked, wrapping her cardigan tighter against the cool English evening. "I was just thinking about the last time we were in London together," he said, not turning around. "Our honeymoon." Elowen's breath caught. They had spent 2 magical weeks exploring the city, back when everything seemed possible, before careers and ambitions and fear had torn them apart. "That was a different time," she said softly. "We were different people. Were we?" He turned to face her, his blue eyes intense in the garden lights. "Or were we just too young to understand what really mattered?" "Dax," she took a step back, heart racing. "We can't do this. We're here for Ava, and for your work. That's all." "Is it?" He moved closer, his cologne, that familiar Tom Ford noir, wrapping around her like a memory. "Because I look at you with her, see how amazing you are as a mother, how much you've grown and changed, and I—" "Please," she whispered, holding up a hand. "Don't. We hurt each other too much before. I won't risk Ava getting caught in the middle if we—" A cry from the baby monitor at her hip interrupted them. Ava's voice, disoriented and afraid in her new surroundings, called out, "Mama, Dada." They moved in unison toward the house, the moment broken, but as they climbed the stairs together, their shoulders brushing in the narrow hallway, Elowen couldn't help but remember another night in London, years ago, when they had walked hand in hand along the Thames, believing their love could conquer anything. In the nursery, they found Ava standing in her crib, tears on her cheeks. "Bad dream," she whimpered, reaching for both of them. Without discussion, they settled into the oversized reading chair, Ava between them. Daxton began to sing softly. Landslides, of course, while Elowen stroked their daughter's hair. Gradually, Ava's eyes grew heavy again, her small body relaxing into sleep. "We should put her back in the crib," Elowen murmured, but made no move to get up. In a minute," Daxton replied, his arm warm where it rested behind her shoulders. Let's just be here, together." And so they sat, in the quiet London night, their sleeping daughter between them, the past and future swirling around them like the mist rising from the garden fountain below. 3 hearts beating in sync, 3 lives intertwined in ways they were only beginning to understand. Outside, Big Ben chimed midnight, its deep tones carrying across the city. Inside the Kensington mansion, in a nursery filled with toys and memories and possibilities, a family teetered on the edge of something new, something that felt dangerously like hope. But hope, as Elowen knew too well, was a double-edged sword, and London, with its romantic streets and rain-washed memories, had a way of making even the impossible seem within reach. 2 weeks into their London stay, Elowen woke to the sound of thunder rolling across the city. Rain lashed against the windows of her bedroom, providing a dramatic backdrop to the early morning light. But it wasn't the storm that had woken her. It was the sound of Ava's delighted squeals coming from downstairs. Following the noise, she found her daughter and Daxton in the kitchen, both covered in flour. The professional grade counters were strewn with baking ingredients, and the smell of pancakes filled the air. "What's all this?" she asked, trying not to smile at the sight of the impeccable Daxton Hill with flour in his beard. "Dada make breakfast," Ava announced proudly from her perch on a safety stool, where she was enthusiastically helping to mix batter. "Storm scary, but pancakes happy." "She woke up frightened by the thunder," Daxton explained, flipping a perfectly golden pancake. "I remembered how you used to say baking makes everything better." The casual reference to their married life made Elowen's heart skip, but before she could respond, her phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Raven's face. "Everything okay at the restaurant?" she asked, answering quickly. "We have a situation." Raven's voice was tense. "The health department showed up for a surprise inspection. They're claiming our new supplier's documentation isn't up to code. They're threatening to shut us down." Elowen's blood ran cold. "What? That's impossible. I vetted everything before I left." "I know, but they're saying the paperwork filed last week doesn't meet the new regulations that just went into effect. We need your digital signature on updated forms within the next 4 hours, or they'll suspend our license." 4 hours. Raven, it's... Elowen glanced at the clock, doing the math. "It's 3 a.m. in New York. They don't care. Some new inspector trying to make a name for himself. I've emailed you the forms, but there's hundreds of pages to review. Daxton, who had been pretending not to listen while helping Ava pour chocolate chips into the batter, spoke up. My legal team can help. They're experts in regulatory compliance. Elowen covered the phone. This is my problem, Dax. I can handle it. Like I handled everything alone before. He raised an eyebrow. Let me help, Ellie. Please. The old nickname, combined with the sight of him standing there in his casual weekend clothes, covered in flour and looking at her with such sincere concern, broke through her defenses. Raven, she said into the phone, I'm sending help, top corporate lawyers. They'll review everything and make sure we're more than compliant. After she hung up, Daxton was already making calls, his CEO persona taking over despite the flour in his hair. Bradford? Yes, I know what time it is. I need you to pull the team together now. Sweet Endings restaurant in Manhattan has a regulatory situation. Mama said, Ava asked, abandoning her pancake mission to reach for Elowen. No, baby. Elowen lifted her daughter, inhaling her sweet morning scent mixed with flour and chocolate. Just worried about the restaurant. I fix, Ava declared, patting Elowen's cheeks with flour-covered hands. Like Dada fix pancakes. Despite her anxiety, Elowen had to laugh. Is that right? And how does Dada fix pancakes? With love, Ava beamed, repeating what was clearly a phrase she'd heard earlier that morning. Elowen's eyes met Daxton's across the kitchen. He'd paused in his call, his expression softening as he looked at them. Something unspoken passed between them, heavy with meaning and memory. The next few hours passed in a blur of legal documents and international calls. Daxton's team worked with ruthless efficiency, finding loopholes and solutions Elowen would never have discovered on her own. By lunchtime, not only was the crisis averted, but Sweet Endings had been certified under regulations that wouldn't even take effect for another year. Crisis managed, Daxton announced, setting down his phone. Your restaurant's compliance rating is now higher than most five-star establishments in Manhattan. Elowen, who had been stress-baking scones while reviewing documents, sagged against the counter in relief. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. He moved closer, brushing flour from her cheek with gentle fingers. We're in this together now, remember? The touch of his hand, warm against her skin, sent electricity through her body. They stood frozen for a moment, the air between them charged with possibility. Together, Ava echoed from her play area, breaking the spell. She'd been entertaining herself with cooking toys, making soup out of wooden vegetables and plastic plates. Daxton dropped his hand, but his eyes remained intense. I meant what I said this morning, about making things better, not just pancakes. Dax, Elowen's voice wavered. We can't just fix everything with flour and lawyers. Why not? He stepped closer, his cologne mixing with the scent of baked goods and rain. We're not the same people we were 2 years ago. I'm not that workaholic who couldn't see past the next deal. You're not that young chef afraid to stand up for what she wanted. We've both grown, both changed. Into co-parents, she reminded him, even as her heart raced. Into people who can work together for Ava's sake. Is that all we are? His voice was low, intimate. Because when I look at you now, I see the woman I fell in love with, but stronger, more confident, more beautiful than ever. When I see you with our daughter, when I watch you manage your restaurant and handle crises, please, she whispered, but didn't step away. We can't risk hurting her. If we try again and fail, what if we don't fail? He reached for her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. What if all of this, London, co-parenting, building trust, what if it's giving us the foundation we never had before? Before she could respond, a crash of thunder shook the house. Ava screamed in surprise, dropping her toy pots and running to them. Without thinking, they both moved to scoop her up, ending with their daughter between them and their faces inches apart. Family hug, Ava demanded, grabbing both their necks and pulling them closer. No more scary, wrapped in their daughter's embrace, with Daxton's arms brushing hers and his breath warm on her cheek. Elowen felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. Because he was right. They weren't the same people. The chemistry between them hadn't changed, but everything else had. They'd learned to communicate, to compromise, to put Ava first. One step at a time, she found herself saying, hardly believing the words leaving her mouth. No promises, no pressure, just seeing where this goes. The smile that broke across Daxton's face was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. One step at a time, he agreed softly. Pancakes time, Ava announced, oblivious to the momentous shift happening around her. More chocolate chips. They laughed together, the sound mixing with the rolling thunder outside. And if their hands lingered when passing ingredients, if their smiles held more warmth than strictly necessary for co-parents, well, London's storms had a way of washing everything clean, making room for new beginnings. Even if those beginnings were as messy as a toddler's chocolate chip pancakes, and as uncertain as the weather outside. The Richardson merger was proving more complex than anticipated. Daxton sat in his London office, tie loosened, reviewing contract amendments at midnight. The city lights twinkled beyond his window, but his mind kept drifting to the Kensington house, where Elowen and Ava were probably already asleep. His phone buzzed with a text from Elowen. Someone refuses to sleep without saying goodnight to Dada. Video call. A smile broke through his exhaustion as he initiated the call. Ava's face filled the screen, her blue eyes bright despite the late hour. Dada, miss you. She pressed her face close to the camera, making him chuckle. I miss you too, princess. Shouldn't you be sleeping? No sleep. Need story. She turned the phone toward her bookshelf expectantly. Ava. Elowen's voice came from off-screen. Daddy's working. He's very busy. It's fine. Daxton interrupted, already reaching for his briefcase. He pulled out a worn copy of Goodnight Moon. He'd started carrying it for moments like this. One story, then straight to bed, deal? Deal! Ava snuggled into her bed, clutching her elephant. As he read, making sure to do all the voices that made her giggle, Daxton caught glimpses of Elowen in the background. She was wearing one of his old Harvard sweatshirts. He'd left it in the laundry room last week, and his heart jumped, seeing her in it. Her honey blonde hair was loose around her shoulders, and she was looking at them with an expression that made his chest tight. After the story and multiple rounds of good night and love you, Ava finally drifted off. Elowen moved the phone away from the crib, her face coming into focus. Thank you, she said softly. She wouldn't settle without hearing from you. I should have been home for bedtime. He rubbed his tired eyes. This merger is becoming more complicated than expected. Is everything okay? The concern in her voice was genuine. The Richardson team is pushing for changes that would require restructuring our entire European division. If we don't find a solution soon, he trailed off, not wanting to voice his fears. When's the last time you ate? The question caught him off guard. I'm not sure. That's what I thought. She shifted, and he could see she was moving through the house. Give me 20 minutes. Ellie, you don't have to. 20 minutes, Dax. Don't argue with the chef. She ended the call before he could protest. True to her word, exactly 20 minutes later, his office door opened. Elowen entered carrying a basket that filled the room with mouth-watering aromas. How did you get past security? He asked, even as he stood to help her unpack what appeared to be a feast. Mrs. Ainsworth called ahead. Apparently, your team has standing orders to let me in whenever I arrive. She raised an eyebrow. Something you forgot to mention? Daxton felt his ears warm. I may have anticipated situations like this. Situations where you work too late and forget to eat. She laid out containers of his favorites, her signature pasta with truffle oil, fresh bread, and what looked like chocolate mousse for dessert. Situations where I might need you, he admitted quietly. Their eyes met across his desk, now transformed into an impromptu dining table. The air between them crackled with unspoken words. Well, she said finally, her cheeks pink. Eat first, then you can tell me about these merger problems. Over the meal, Daxton found himself explaining the intricacies of the deal. Elowen listened intently, asking surprisingly insightful questions between bites. So basically, she summarized, they want to standardize operations across all European locations, but your London team has developed unique processes that are more efficient. Exactly. Forcing them to change would mean months of retraining, potential staff losses. What if you didn't change them? She leaned forward, eyes bright. What if instead, you implemented their successful processes across other locations? Sometimes the best recipes come from unexpected combinations. Daxton stared at her, mind racing. That's brilliant. We could present it as a pilot program. Use London's success metrics as proof of concept. See? She smiled, gathering empty containers. Sometimes you just need a fresh perspective, and food that isn't from the vending machine, I've missed this, he said suddenly, catching her hand as she reached for the last container. Bouncing ideas off you, hearing your insights. You always saw things differently than anyone else. Dax. But she didn't pull her hand away. Have dinner with me tomorrow night, he said quickly. A real dinner, not takeout in my office. There's this little Italian place in Notting Hill. We can't. Ava, Mrs. Ainsworth already offered to babysit. She mentioned it last week, said we both work too hard. Elowen's eyes widened. You've been planning this, hoping for it, he corrected gently. One step at a time, remember? She was quiet for a long moment, her hand warm in his. What time? 7. His heart raced. I'll have a car pick you up. I can drive myself. Please. He squeezed her hand. Let me do this properly. A soft smile touched her lips. Okay. 7 it is. She slipped her hand free and gathered her things, but paused at the door. Don't stay too late. Our daughter has plans to drag you to the London Eye tomorrow morning, and she's very persistent. Like her mother, he called after her, grinning at her mock glare. After she left, Daxton turned back to the contracts with renewed energy. The solution she'd suggested was elegant in its simplicity, exactly the kind of thinking that had first attracted him to her years ago. His phone buzzed with another text. The sweatshirt was in the laundry. I'm just being practical, he smiled, typing back, it looks better on you anyway. When no response came, he pictured her blushing as she read it, maybe curled up in that same sweatshirt in the reading nook of her room. The thought made his chest warm. Hours later, as he finally headed home, the night guard stopped him. Your wife brought dinner again, Mr. Hill. Nice to see some things haven't changed. Daxton started to correct him, to say Elowen wasn't his wife anymore, but stopped. Instead, he just nodded, the word wife echoing in his mind as he drove through London's empty streets. At home, he found Elowen asleep in the nursery's reading chair, still wearing his sweatshirt. A half-empty cup of tea sat on the side table, and Ava's stuffed elephant had somehow migrated to her lap. Carefully, he draped a blanket over her, allowing himself one moment to brush a strand of hair from her face. She stirred slightly but didn't wake, turning instinctively toward his touch. Sweet dreams, Ellie, he whispered, forcing himself to step back, to remember their one step at a time agreement. But as he headed to his own room, her dinner invitation acceptance warming his heart, Daxton realized that some steps felt more like coming home than moving forward. Tomorrow night couldn't come soon enough. The little Italian restaurant in Notting Hill was exactly as Daxton remembered from their honeymoon. Intimate, romantic, with candlelight casting warm shadows across white tablecloths. He'd arrived early, his heart racing like a teenager's first date rather than dinner with his ex-wife. When Elowen walked in, time seemed to stop. She wore a deep green dress that made her eyes sparkle, her honey blonde hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. The maitre d' led her to their secluded corner table, and Daxton stood, taking in the sight of her. You look beautiful, he said softly, pulling out her chair. Thank you. A blush colored her cheeks as she sat. This place. It hasn't changed at all. I hoped you'd remember it. He took his own seat, trying to calm his racing pulse. Though last time you were trying to convince me to invest in your restaurant dream, and you were trying to convince me that Manhattan real estate was a better investment. She smiled at the memory. We were both so young, so sure we knew everything. You proved me wrong. He poured her a glass of the wine they'd selected, the same vintage they'd shared on their honeymoon. Sweet Endings is more successful than any property investment would have been. Thanks to today's legal help, it still is. She took a sip of wine, then set it down carefully. Dax, about last night, thank you. Not just for the legal team, but for letting me help with the merger situation. Your solution was brilliant. The board approved the pilot program this morning. Their conversation flowed easily through appetizers and into the main course, moving from business to memories to Ava's latest adventures. It felt natural, comfortable, yet charged with an underlying current of possibility. She tried to convince Mrs. Ainsworth that elephants need chocolate chip cookies. Elowen laughed, describing their daughter's latest negotiation attempt, complete with a PowerPoint presentation she made you help her with. Hey, those were very compelling slides, Daxton defended, grinning. The elephant clip art was particularly persuasive. She's definitely your daughter. Same negotiation skills, same blue eyes, same way of tilting her head when she's thinking. But she has your heart, he said softly. Your kindness, your creativity, your way of making everyone around her feel special. The candlelight flickered between them as their eyes met. The waiter approached with dessert menus, but Daxton had other plans. Do you trust me? He asked, standing and offering his hand. Elowen looked at him for a long moment before placing her hand in his. Against my better judgment, yes. He led her out of the restaurant and down the cobblestone streets of Notting Hill. The summer evening was perfect, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers from nearby gardens. Where are we going? You'll see. They turned a corner, and there it was, the tiny gelato shop they'd discovered on their honeymoon, still open despite the late hour. Elowen's face lit up with recognition. They still have it? She asked hopefully. Lavender honey? I called ahead to check. They got their gelatos, lavender honey for her, dark chocolate for him, and walked through a small park nearby. The full moon cast silver light across the grass, and somewhere in the distance, street musicians played a familiar melody. Is that? Elowen stopped, listening. Landslide. Daxton smiled. It seems like London is conspiring with our daughter's musical tastes tonight. Without warning, he took her gelato cup, set both desserts on a nearby bench, and pulled her into his arms. Dax, what are you? Dance with me, he said softly. Like we used to. She should have said no, should have maintained their careful boundaries. Instead, she found herself stepping closer, one hand in his, the other resting on his shoulder. His arm wrapped around her waist, warm and secure, as they swayed to the distant music. I've thought about this, he admitted, his voice low. Every time we dance with Ava in the kitchen, every time I hear this song, I think about holding you like this again. We agreed on one step at a time, she reminded him, but made no move to pull away. And what step is this? I don't know. She looked up at him, moonlight catching in her eyes. That's what scares me. He pulled her closer, their foreheads almost touching. What are you afraid of, Ellie? Falling again, she whispered. Falling and not being able to catch myself this time. What if I catch you? His hand moved to cup her cheek. What if we catch each other? The music swelled around them, Stevie Nicks' voice carrying on the night air. Elowen's fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. You hurt me, she said softly. When you chose work over everything else, when you made it clear children weren't in your future. I know, his thumb traced her cheekbone. And you hurt me when you left without giving me a chance to change, without telling me about our daughter. We both made mistakes, huge ones. But look at us now. He gestured to their surroundings, the moonlit park, the melting gelato, the echoing music. We're different people, better people, parents, partners, she repeated, testing the word. In everything, if you'll let us be. His eyes searched hers. I love who you've become, Ellie. The amazing mother, the successful chef, the woman strong enough to face her fears and come to London. I love watching you with Ava, love seeing you stand up for what you want, love. She kissed him. It wasn't their first kiss since reuniting. That would come later, both would insist, neither willing to admit this moment of perfect vulnerability, but it was the kiss that changed everything, that tasted of lavender honey gelato and possibility, that felt like coming home and starting fresh all at once. When they finally parted, breathless and trembling, the music had changed, but neither noticed. Daxton rested his forehead against hers, unwilling to let go. Was that one step or several? She asked, a smile playing at her lips. I've lost count. He brushed another soft kiss across her mouth. Do you want to go back to counting? No, she admitted, curling closer into his embrace. But I want to do this right this time. For all of us. We will. He held her tighter, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume mixed with the summer night air. No more hiding from hard conversations, no more assumptions. Just us, figuring it out together. They stayed in the park until their gelato melted completely, dancing to whatever music drifted their way, talking about everything and nothing. When they finally walked home hand in hand, the streets of London felt different, full of promise rather than memories. At the house, they found Mrs. Ainsworth reading in the living room. She took one look at their clasped hands and bright eyes and smiled knowingly. Ava's been sleeping soundly, she reported, gathering her things, though she did insist on wearing her father's tie to bed. Something about important business meetings with her elephant. They thanked her and crept upstairs to check on their daughter. Ava lay sprawled in her crib, Daxton's blue silk tie draped around her neck, her stuffed elephant tucked under one arm. Like father, like daughter, Elowen whispered, leaning back against Daxton's chest as they watched their little girl sleep. His arms wrapped around her waist, and she felt his smile against her hair. Speaking of my clothes, you still have my Harvard sweatshirt. I'm not giving it back. Good. He turned her in his arms, expression serious despite his smile. Keep it. Keep anything you want. Keep you? She finished softly. Is, he corrected, kissing her again, gentle and sweet. All of us. Later, they would face the complexities of rebuilding trust, of merging their lives, of being not just co-parents but partners again. But for now, in the quiet London night, with their daughter sleeping peacefully and the taste of lavender honey still on their lips, they had taken the biggest step of all, believing in second chances. The London summer was drawing to a close, and with it came news that would test everything Daxton and Elowen had rebuilt. The morning started normally enough. Breakfast with Ava, who had recently decided that pancakes were only acceptable if shaped like elephants, a skill Daxton was still trying to master. That's not elephant, Dada, Ava critiqued, pointing at his latest attempt. That's blob. She's not wrong. Elowen laughed, expertly flipping her own perfect elephant-shaped pancake. She wore his Harvard sweatshirt over leggings, her hair in a messy bun, looking more beautiful to him than ever. Daxton was about to defend his culinary efforts when his phone buzzed. Bradford's name flashed on the screen. I have to take this, he said, kissing Ava's curls and Elowen's cheek before stepping into his home office. 10 minutes later, he emerged to find them dancing in the kitchen to Landslide, their morning ritual. The sight, which usually filled him with joy, now made his heart ache. Ellie, he said softly, we need to talk. Something in his tone made her pause the music. Ava, sweetie, why don't you go play in your room for a bit? No, dance more. How about a special tea party with Mrs. Ainsworth? Elowen suggested, catching the housekeeper's eye. The older woman immediately understood, whisking Ava upstairs with promises of cookies and stories. Once they were alone, Elowen turned to him. What's wrong? Daxton ran a hand over his face, his perfectly maintained beard doing little to hide his tension. The board called an emergency meeting. The Richardson merger. There's been a complication. What kind of complication? They want me to stay. Not just for a few more months, they're offering me a permanent position as CEO of European operations. The silence that followed was deafening. Elowen gripped the kitchen counter, her knuckles white. When? She finally asked. They need an answer by tomorrow. If I accept, I'd start immediately after the merger completes next month. And if you don't? He met her eyes. They'll give the position to Xavier Richardson's son. He's already promised to dismantle our London team, implement standardized procedures across all European locations. Everything we've built here, all the unique processes we developed, gone, along with how many jobs? At least 300 in London alone. More across Europe. Elowen sank into a kitchen chair, her face pale. 300 families. I know. He knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. But staying here, it would mean changing everything we planned. Your restaurant in New York, Ava's preschool, our fresh start, she whispered. We could make a life here, he said quickly. London has amazing schools. You could open a new restaurant. I've seen how inspired you've been by the local cuisine. We could... Stop. She pulled her hands away, standing abruptly. I need a minute. He watched as she paced the kitchen, her arms wrapped around herself. Through the window, storm clouds gathered over London, matching the darkness of their mood. Do you want to stay? She finally asked. I want us to stay together, he answered carefully. All of us. That's not what I asked, Dax. She turned to face him, her green eyes intense. Do you, Daxton Hill, want to stay in London? He was quiet for a long moment. Yes, he admitted finally. I've built something special here. This team, these people, they trust me, depend on me. The work we're doing could revolutionize how international business operates. Just like Sweet Endings depends on me. Her voice cracked slightly. Just like my staff trusted me to come back. Ellie, 2 years ago, she cut him off. I made a huge decision that affected all of us without giving you a choice. I ran away because I was scared, because I thought I knew what was best. And now, this is different, he insisted, moving toward her. Is it? She stepped back, and the distance between them felt like miles. You're asking me to uproot our daughter's life. Abandon my business. Leave everything we know. I'm asking you to build something new with me." His voice rose slightly. "To trust that we can make this work. Like you trusted me to make the restaurant work, when you told me it was a pipe dream, that I should focus on realistic goals." The old hurt in her voice made him flinch. "I was wrong then. I know that now. Sweet Endings is incredible, and you're an amazing chef. That's why I know you could do even more here. But it would be starting over. Everything I've built, everyone who's helped me get here." She shook her head. "I can't ask Raven and the others to keep covering for me indefinitely. It's not fair to them. And it's fair to ask 300 people to lose their jobs." As soon as the words left his mouth, he knew he'd made a mistake. Elowen's face went completely still. "So that's it." Her voice was eerily calm. "Either I give up my dream, or I'm responsible for hundreds of people losing their livelihoods." "No, that's not—" "Mama?" Ava's small voice came from the doorway. Neither had heard her return. "Why fighting?" Elowen scooped up their daughter, holding her close. "We're not fighting, baby. Mama and Dada are just talking about some grown-up things." "Sad talking," Ava observed, patting Elowen's cheeks in her familiar gesture. "Yeah, sweet girl." Elowen's voice wavered. "Sometimes grown-up talks are sad." Daxton moved to embrace them both, but Elowen stepped away. "I need some air," she said quietly. "Mrs. Ainsworth, could you—" The housekeeper appeared instantly, as if she'd been hovering nearby. "Come on, Miss Ava. Let's go make that special tea party even more special." Once they were alone again, Elowen grabbed her coat. "I'm going for a walk." "Ellie, please, don't." She held up a hand. "Just give me time to think. You have until tomorrow to decide, right? Give me until tonight." He watched helplessly as she walked out into the gathering storm. Through the window, he saw her pause at the garden gate, her shoulders shaking slightly. Every fiber of his being screamed to go after her, to hold her, to promise they'd figure it out. Instead, he turned to his office, where emails demanding his attention piled up. But all he could see was the hurt in Elowen's eyes, the same hurt he'd sworn never to cause again. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall on London streets, and Daxton wondered if some storms were impossible to weather, no matter how much love tried to shield you from the rain. The rain had turned London streets into rivers of reflection by the time Elowen returned to the Kensington house. She was soaked through, her honey blonde hair plastered to her face, but her eyes held a clarity that hadn't been there when she left. She found Daxton in his office, surrounded by papers and looking more disheveled than she'd seen him since their reunion. His perfectly trimmed beard couldn't hide the tension in his jaw, and his rolled-up sleeves revealed arms tense with stress. "You'll never guess who I ran into," she said softly from the doorway. He looked up, relief flooding his face at her return. "Ellie, the owner of that little Italian restaurant in Notting Hill," she continued, moving into the room. "He remembered us from our honeymoon, and from our dinner last month. Antonio." Daxton nodded, standing slowly. "He always said we were his favorite couple. He still does." She pulled something from her coat pocket, a slightly damp envelope. "He gave me this. Said he's been holding on to it for 7 years. Daxton took the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a photograph, obviously taken without their knowledge during their honeymoon dinner. Young Daxton and Elowen sat close together, her hand gesturing excitedly as she explained her restaurant dreams, his eyes fixed on her with pure adoration. "I remember that night," he said quietly. "You were telling me about the special dessert menu you wanted to create, how each dish would tell a story. And you were pretending to understand the difference between gelato and regular ice cream." A small smile touched her lips. "I still don't know the difference." "Yes, you do. You just like making me explain it." She moved closer, her wet clothes dripping on his expensive carpet. "Do you know what I see in that photo?" He shook his head, unable to look away from her intense green eyes. "I see 2 people who thought love was enough, who hadn't learned that love needs trust and communication, and sometimes it needs courage." "Ellie, let me finish." She took a deep breath. "I've spent the last 6 hours walking around London, thinking about choices, about how 2 years ago, I made a choice based on fear. I was so scared of your rejection that I rejected you first. I took away your chance to be Ava's father because I couldn't bear the thought of you choosing not to be." She reached for the photo, her fingers brushing his. "But today, you're giving me a choice. A hard one, yes, but you're not making it for me." You're asking me to make it with you. I would never force you to stay, he said roughly. If you want to go back to New York. I called Raven. She interrupted. Put her on speakerphone with the whole staff. Told them everything. About London. About the opportunity here. About us. Do you know what they said? He held his breath, waiting. They said it was about time. That they've been running Sweet Endings successfully for months. That Raven's been ready to be head chef for years but didn't want to tell me because she knew how much I needed to feel in control after everything. What are you saying? I'm saying, she stepped even closer, that maybe it's time for both of us to be brave. Maybe Sweet Endings doesn't have to end. Maybe it can evolve. Pop-up restaurants are huge in London. International fusion cuisine is trending. And I know this brilliant CEO who might be willing to help with the business plan. Hope bloomed in Daxton's chest, but he forced himself to ask, Are you sure? This would change everything. Everything's already changed, Dax. She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing his beard the way Ava so often did. The moment you saw us on that street 4 months ago, everything changed. We just had to catch up to it. But your restaurant will always be my first baby. But maybe, like us, it needs to grow, change, take brave new steps. She smiled through tears. Besides, someone very wise once told me that the best recipes come from unexpected combinations. Daxton pulled her into his arms, not caring that her wet clothes soaked through his shirt. I love you, he whispered against her hair. I never stopped. Not really. I know. She tilted her face up to his. I love you too. Enough to be brave this time. Their kiss tasted of rain and promises, of endings and beginnings all mixed together. They broke apart at the sound of tiny footsteps running down the hall. Mama back! Ava burst into the office, still wearing the chef's hat Mrs. Ainsworth had made her from paper. Why all wet? Because sometimes, Elowen scooped up their daughter. Mama needs a little rain to help her see clearly. See what? Ava asked, reaching to pat both their faces in turn. That home isn't a place, princess, Daxton said, wrapping his arms around them both. It's where your heart feels full. Heart full here, Ava declared, snuggling between them. Yes, it is, Elowen agreed softly, meeting Daxton's eyes over their daughter's curls. And it's about to get even fuller. Later that night, after Ava was asleep and Elowen had changed into dry clothes, his Harvard sweatshirt, of course, they sat in the garden. The storm had passed, leaving the air fresh and clean. Stars peeked through breaks in the clouds, and somewhere in the distance a familiar song played. You know, Daxton said, pulling Elowen closer on the garden bench. We never finished our dance that night in the park. She laughed softly. Is that your way of asking me to dance? No, he stood, offering his hand. This is my way of asking you to dance with me for the rest of our lives, to be brave with me, to trust me, to build something amazing together, here in London, in New York, anywhere our hearts feel full. Smooth talker, she teased, but took his hand, letting him pull her into his arms. But you forgot one thing. What's that? To thank our daughter for having better timing than both of us combined. They swayed together under the clearing sky, their laughter mixing with the distant music. Above them, the stars winked like promises, and in the nursery window, a tiny figure in dinosaur pajamas watched her parents dance, clutching her elephant and smiling. Sometimes love needs a second chance to get it right. Sometimes it needs a storm to wash away old fears. And sometimes it needs a little girl with her father's blue eyes and her mother's heart to show the way home. For Daxton and Elowen, it had taken all three, but standing there in their London garden, holding each other close as the last clouds drifted away, they knew that some loves were worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth being brave for, and this love, their love, was just beginning again. The end 1 year later, the grand opening of Sweet Endings London had drawn quite a crowd to Notting Hill. The historic building, with its Victorian facade and modern interior, buzzed with excitement as London's food critics and social elite mingled with regular customers who had followed the pop-up restaurant's success over the past year. In the state-of-the-art kitchen, Elowen adjusted her chef's coat, now emblazoned with both New York and London logos. The familiar scent of vanilla and spices filled the air as her team prepared for the evening service. Mama, look! Ava, now 2.5, burst into the kitchen wearing a miniature chef's coat that matched her mother's. Her blonde curls were barely contained under a tiny chef's hat, and her blue eyes sparkled with excitement. "John, what have you got there, sweet girl?" "Special menu." Ava proudly held up a crayon drawing of what might have been an elephant eating what might have been a cake. "For Daddy's office." "Perfect timing." Daxton's voice came from the doorway. He'd loosened his tie after a day at the European headquarters, but his beard was as impeccable as ever. "I could use some artwork to brighten up those boring meetings." He scooped up Ava, who immediately reached to straighten his tie, a habit she'd developed over the past year. "Ready for the big night?" Elowen looked around her kitchen, her second kitchen, in her second city, with her second chance at love. Almost, just waiting for special delivery. Raven burst through the back door, carrying a familiar-looking dessert. Your signature lavender honey gelato, transported straight from New York as promised. Though I still say the London version is just as good. It's tradition. Elowen smiled, hugging her friend and now co-head chef. "We served it at our first wedding, at our first London dinner, and now, Daxton moved closer, shifting Ava to one arm so he could pull something from his pocket. "Maybe we need it for one more tradition." The small velvet box he produced made Elowen's heart stop. Inside was a ring she recognized, her grandmother's antique sapphire, the one she'd left behind 2 years ago, now restored and resized. "I think," he said softly, "it's time this came home, just like we did." Ava clapped her hands. "Pretty ring. Like the story." "What story is that, princess?" Daxton asked, though his eyes never left Elowen's face. "The one about the daddy who found his girls in the snow, and the mommy who was brave in the rain, and the love that got bigger and bigger." She spread her arms wide to demonstrate, nearly knocking off her chef's hat. "That's right." Elowen laughed through happy tears, letting Daxton slip the ring onto her finger. "And do you remember how that story ends?" Ava's face lit up with her father's smile. With full hearts. Outside, the London evening settled into twilight, and the first customers began to arrive. Inside, a family held each other close, their hearts indeed completely full, their story not ending but beginning again, stronger, braver, and sweeter than ever before. The end after experiencing this emotional journey of love, forgiveness, and second chances between Daxton and Elowen. Consider this. When it comes to love and trust, what's braver, walking away to protect your heart, or staying to give someone a second chance? Think about Elowen's initial choice to leave with her pregnancy secret, and her later decision to trust Daxton again in London. Which decision showed more courage, and what would you have done in her place? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.